The president has claimed he signed the most favored nations executive order on prescription drugs. He mentioned this again last night. We haven't seen the text. Has he actually signed the EO? And if so, when will we see the text? And can you tell us what the status of negotiations are with Pharma?
Yeah, so the EO I believe he's referring to there is the previous one he's signed. A provision of that was most favored nation, which means that for Medicare programs, you have two ways to get prescriptions, Part D or Part B. Part B are drugs you would receive at the doctor's office, and the executive order tells the secretary to peg prices for Part B to a most favored nation price to make sure that American citizens are getting their medications at a price equally as cheap as other countries. So that was the initial EO I believe he was referring to, but any updates, I'll let you know in the upcoming days. Yes.
Thank you, Kayleigh. Just following up on the coronavirus issues, how is it not misleading for his advisors to tell him and compare this virus potential to the Spanish flu of 1918, but then for the president to say that this could disappear by April?
The president, again, was expressing calm. The president was hopeful that COVID that we would be able to manage this and handle it in a way that we can make it go away as quickly as possible. And the president rose to the occasion and did just that. This was a lot more. By the way, it's worth mentioning. The misleading that the WHO and China did on this. When you had the WHO, they were repeating China's claim that the virus does not transmit. This was a novel virus no one had seen, and you have the World Health Organization saying this virus does not transmit readily. That is the information we were getting. You had the
Robert O'Brien said that this virus could be the biggest threat to his presidency. Matt Pottinger agreed with that assessment. And then President Trump would later say that no one could have predicted this when his own experts were predicting this.
Look, you're referring to the intel community, and what the president knew was, and I've walked you through this before, on January 23rd, the intel community briefed President Trump for the first time about COVID, and the briefing said coronavirus from China is poised to spread globally, but the good news is that it is not deadly for most people. This is the information President Trump was getting, and the next time he was briefed on it was January 28th, when he was told that the spread was happening outside of China and the deaths remained all inside China. He was told then that China is not sharing key data. Indeed, China was not, because as I noted to you on January 9th, the World Health Organization said it does not readily transmit between people, and on January 14th, the World Health Organization said no clear evidence of human-to-human transmission. Clearly, that was not true. Even on February 29th, as the virus was spreading, the WHO put political correctness first by opposing travel restrictions. Note that on January 31st, President Trump put into place those travel restrictions that Democrats called xenophobic. Shame on them. Yes.
Kayleigh, on the same day the president tweeted that the virus would become weaker when the weather started getting warmer, he told Bob Woodward it was going to be deadly stuff. So why does Bob Woodward get the president's unvarnished opinion when the American people don't?
He was giving Bob Woodward the same opinion he gave from the podium. And he said, I am here, I want to express calm. That is what a leader does. He has always shared the facts, he has always been forthright, and he's always followed the advice of his medical experts, like Dr. Fauci, who called his response impressive. Yes.
He never said this was deadly stuff.
Yes.
The American people.
Yes, he did. He acknowledged that hundreds of thousands could die, and he took the right response, which was to temporarily shut down the country, saved millions of lives, and so too have his therapeutics, so too will the vaccine that's being developed. Yes.
The protests in Belarus continue, as well as the crackdown on the opposition. What concrete steps the president is going to take to support Belarusians in their struggle for democracy and to stop human rights abuses?
Yeah, it's another very good question. The U.S. is extremely concerned by continued human rights violations in the wake of Belarus's election. Reports of opposition figures being kidnapped, forcibly expelled, or otherwise threatened are just a few of the many methods that the Belarusian government is using in its attempts to deny freedom of speech. The U.S. is working with our international partners to hold all of those committing these abuses accountable, and we call on the Belarusian government to release all who are being unjustly detained. As for the election there was not a real election. It was neither free nor fair. It was fraudulent. The massive number of Belarusians protesting peacefully makes clear that the government can no longer ignore the people's calls for democracy. Yes.
Kayleigh, how is the president keeping his promise of ending endless wars if this announcement on Iraq is just a drawdown, not a withdrawal? There are still troops in Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain. There's still troops. It's not really keeping the 2016 promise, is it?
The president's drawing down our troops. These things take time. We want to ensure that the Iraqi security forces are well trained, and our U.S. troops have done a magnificent job doing just that. We believe that now is the time when we can make this drawdown, keep the country stable because of the training that our troops have done. So,
Of an attempt to kind of try and make it look like the promise is being kept in advance of the election?
no, not at all. This is an expression that we believe that Iraqi security forces can do this alongside the troops that will remain there. And the facts tell the story that this president broke the 39-year-old streak of American presidents either starting a war or bringing the United States into an international armed conflict. So unlike past presidents, this president has prioritized peace through strength, which is his foreign
Just
policy.
one really
Yes,
quick
Chanel.
follow-up, just really
Thank you,
quick
Kayleigh.
follow-up.
Chanel.
Sorry. Just on the breaking the 39-year trend, how does that work if the president sent troops into Saudi Arabia?
Chanel.
Kayleigh, thank you. With Kosovo and United Arab Emirates, these are Muslim-majority countries spanning 2 continents now, each bringing some kind of agreement with Israel towards peace. So my question is 2 points. Number 1, have the Palestinians opened up any kind of discourse with the White House as to their reaction to these developments with Israel and Middle Eastern countries? And number 2, have the Palestinians actually expressed any interest in distancing themselves from Iran in the interest of Middle East peace?
Yeah, through the deal, President Trump made additional progress on reaching peace in the Middle East. Kosovo and Israel agreed to mutual recognition and normalization of ties, and Serbia committed to moving its embassy to Jerusalem only a few weeks after the historic Abraham Accords between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. This is another huge step forward for broader peace in the Middle East and the rest of the world. I'd refer you to the Palestinians for their reaction, but it is quite telling that this historic agreement between Serbia and Kosovo addressing a decades-long conflict was only mentioned one time on CNN and one time on MSNBC. Yes.
Thank you, Kayleigh. I wanted to ask about the Winter Olympics in Beijing in 2022. More than 160 human rights groups have called on the International Olympic Committee chief to revoke the Games from Beijing. Would President Trump support an American boycott of the Games over the Chinese regime's human rights abuses?
I haven't spoken to him specifically on that, so I'd have to get back to you. But this president has always held China accountable. His actions very clearly show that. He has stood up to China, unlike any president before him in modern history. But one thing I do want to address is just this really egregious, and I addressed it on Friday, but it's worth updating, this Atlantic story written by a liberal activist. Now you have 25 people who have spoken out and dismissed this story, and now you even have the author of the story who said, quote, "I share the view that it's not good enough," quote, referring to the fact that he did this false report based on anonymous sources. And basically, when you look at the liberal activist who wrote this, he has a very bad history. He can't be trusted. The left's new hero used to be their number one enemy for his role in the U.S. entry into Iraq. Indeed, in the early 2000s, this author was then at the New Yorker, and he extensively wrote on the possible links between Iraq and al-Qaeda, a suggested link that was key behind the decision of U.S. involvement in Iraq. He relied on people who, in his words, quote, "seemed to me to be credible," who said that they had information about such connections between al-Qaeda and Iraq. And Goldberg's reporting simply backed up his view that the U.S. should invade Iraq. In Slate in 2002, this author argued in favor of the U.S. invading Iraq. And later, he even admitted that he knew people blamed him for helping to get the U.S. into the war. He wrote a sarcastic piece saying, yes, I know I started the Iraq War. His reporting cannot be trusted, as noted by the fact that 25 people have come out on the record dismissing his report, the report by liberal activists. Thank you.
Kayleigh, can you take more questions?